Discover the amazing secrets of how 500 years of medieval villagers thrived in the harshest cold. Jessica Thompson wiped her brow, biting back the frustration rising in her throat. The chill of a Minnesota winter seeped through the creaky boards of her late grandfather's house while her two children played in the living room, oblivious to her internal battle. Balancing the demands of her social work job while nurturing her kids felt like a Sisyphean task. Some days she questioned her abilities, feeling as if she were constantly drowning in paperwork, while the very families she fought for slipped through her fingers. Her phone buzzed, a reminder of an upcoming council meeting that threatened to cut essential social services. Each notification made her stomach twist. Was she more committed to her community than to her own children? The thought gnawed at her relentlessly. She glanced again at her kids, their laughter a beacon of innocence amidst her growing dread. Their future was entwined with her decisions, and the weight of that responsibility clouded her mind. In the midst of troubling thoughts, she knelt to begin the renovations, pulling up an old floorboard. When her fingers brushed against a heavy wooden box, concealed within the dust and shadows. A surprising find, what secrets within could ease her spiraling thoughts. Inside lay a leather-bound diary, its pages worn yet vibrant, tales of a life once lived in a medieval village that had triumphed against brutal winters. The stories she read ignited something deep within her, a flicker of hope, a reminder of resilience. As Jessica turned the pages, a surge of inspiration filled her. If villagers could endure monstrous winters with community bonds, surely she could weather her own storms. She found herself absorbing lessons of perseverance and resourcefulness, clinging to each entry as if they were lifelines tethering her to strength. But outside the muffled comfort of that house, the impending threat of service cuts loomed over her. She hesitated, a simmering conflict brewing within. Should she protect her children or advocate for those who had leaned on her skills and strength? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the hours slipped away, Jessica felt every ounce of struggle amplify. Her thoughts twisted. It wasn't just about speaking up for families threatened by these cuts, it was her survival too. What if her escalating commitment to her job compromised her ability to support her children? She envisioned her daughter facing the bullying whispers of classmates as they navigated their own precarious childhoods, and her son grappling with the glaring absence of support systems. Each thought struck like a rock to her chest. Then came an unexpected visit from Mrs. Alder, their elderly neighbor. In her warm presence and shared stories, Jessica saw another reflection of resilience, one that echoed her own ancestral ties. Could her worry tie her to forlorn hopes of tackling this injustice? The inkling of unity sparked in her felt daunting yet necessary. Would she find the strength to rally her neighbors, or would her own family crumble? As she stared at the diary, its wisdom weighed heavily in her heart. What truths would she unearth about her own legacy? Just as determination bubbled within her, Mrs. Alder's hushed words about hidden family secrets hung ominously in the air. Jessica felt the solidity beneath her cope fracturing. Would she dare to learn more? Would she risk everything to know who she truly was? She stood at the precipice of a choice that could redefine her life as she knew it, knowing deep within that this path led either to liberation or despair. The room fell silent, her breath hitched. In that moment, Jessica felt the crushing urgency of her dilemma. Would she take the leap, or would the weight of expectations drown her spirit? Jessica stood motionless, the heavy diary resting against her palms like a silent judge of her choices. The chill in the air felt almost tangible, yet it was nothing compared to the frost settling in her heart. With determination creeping in, she decided she would dive deeper into the diary's contents. Caught between the thrill of discovery and the weight of obligation, she returned to her reading, feeling an urge to escape into the storied world of medieval villagers. Each tale spoke of survival, warmth shared in celebration, the strength found in collaboration. She absorbed every lesson imparted on resourcefulness. It revived her energy, igniting a flame that had flickered beneath layers of doubt. If they could endure the harshest winters, surely she could face the council meeting unflinchingly, a voice for those who feared silence. Yet, the call of her children lingered, tethering her to the present. Their laughter faded as her thoughts spiraled into the future. Questions slammed into her mind like an unwelcome storm. What did her commitment reveal about her values? Was she destined to prioritize struggle over stability? The weight of choosing between selflessness and survival pressed down, tightening her chest further. Pushing aside the thoughts, Jessica forced herself to focus not on the overwhelming fear of loss, but on the potential for growth. What did family legacy mean, and how could lessons from medieval lifetimes inform her choices today? She found herself seeking Mrs. Alder again, almost instinctively, the older woman a whisper of connection to answers just beyond reach. When Mrs. Alder returned the next day, Jessica wrestled with the urge to lay it all bare, entanglement of her fears and aspirations spilling forth. Instead, she attempted to bask in the serenity the woman brought. They settled by the living room fire, and as Jessica sipped her tea, feeling the warmth seep into her bones, she urged the older woman to share more stories of the past. Mrs. Alder responded, her voice steady, knitting history together with personal anecdotes that unfolded like weathered pages. Your family, she began, has a rich history of resilience, always looking out for each other, and for those around you. I see that spark in you, dear. It's your choice whether to let it shine bright. The elder's eyes twinkled, a map of hopeful guidance, laying bare a path Jessica had not yet dared to consider. As Mrs. Alder wove narratives of togetherness, Jessica's thoughts flickered back to the diary and the long-lost villagers. She felt their triumph course through her, the bravery of those who didn't merely survive but thrived in adversity. Could she find a way to harness that same spirit for herself and her children? The next days became an exploration of heritage. Jessica unearthed hidden aspects of her life. She crafted community among her neighbors, first with small gatherings, lending a hand here where families were struggling, creating a tapestry of support that reinforced her resolve. She could build bridges, she realized. Warmth could flow if she fostered connections. Each interaction drew her one step closer to embracing her own strength. Yet as her spirit soared, whispers of doubt loomed. The council meeting loomed imminent, and fear resurfaced, questions rising. Would her newfound strength wane when challenged? Would she falter against forces vying to diminish the very community dynamics she refused to ignore? The familiar gnawing in her stomach returned as she pondered these decisions. Jessica found herself caught in a balancing act. Could she manage to speak her truth without sacrificing her children's stability? The meeting neared like a freight train barreling down a track, and each day brought her closer to inevitable confrontation. It was no longer just about her original fears versus her aspirations. It became a question of identity. Could her voice become the very catalyst that sparked a legacy of resilience for her descendants, echoing through generations, just like the villagers before her? Grit hardened her resolve as she prepared to confront the challenges ahead. Yet the overwhelming sense of the unknown loomed. How would this choice alter her family's trajectory? Amidst the dawning realization of her potential, a sudden flash of uncertainty shot through her. Would the journey of rediscovering her voice fortify her, or would the weight of expectations, both external and internal, crush her spirit as she forged ahead? The paradox felt insurmountable, yet that sense of urgency pulled her to the brink. As she peered into the uncertain future, Jessica clenched her fist around the diary, the silent promise of both freedom and burden evident in its worn leather jacket. Could she weave her history with hope, rather than fear? With her heart pounding and determination flaring, the moment arrived. Would she have the courage to seize her narrative, or would she shrink back into the shadows of doubt, surrendering once again to fate? The council meeting awaited her like a crucible, an opportunity to face not just others but the very essence of herself. Would she step into the arena, or falter before her fears? Jessica could feel the tension wrap around her like a thick fog as the day of the council meeting approached. Each passing moment seemed to amplify the cacophony of doubt wrestling in her mind, pulling her in conflicting directions. The lessons from the diary echoed within her, whispering mantras of resilience, yet the gravity of the impending confrontation seemed more potent than any motivational speech ever could. She spent her mornings poring over the diary, trying to sift through the wisdom, sorting through those centuries-old villagers' experiences like a detective piecing together clues. Themes of survival and strength emerged, wrapping tighter around her resolve. Yet for every lesson learned, a contrasting fear established root within her. Would she measure up? The stakes felt disproportionately high, and uncertainty loomed ominously over her, like a dark cloud on the horizon. In her eagerness to prepare, Jessica turned to her neighbors more fervently. Distributing baked goods became her small act of persuasion, not to win them over for the meeting, but to subtly weave their concerns into her own heart. The act of giving grounded her, reminding her of her intentions to advocate for their welfare. Little moments of connection, a nod from a parent whose child had been bullied, gratitude from a lone grandmother facing isolation spurred a sense of belonging that filled her with strength. Yet, they burdened her with the weight of their hopes. During these encounters, scattered yet meaningful conversations unfolded. Comments about the neighboring town's decisions on zoning and planning illuminated gaps in her own knowledge. She hadn't recognized how isolated she had been from the very subjects that would soon be debated. A sense of urgency washed over her as she finalized her points. This wasn't just about herself anymore. It couldn't be. Blinded by fear, she had underestimated her capacity to learn, to grow, and to speak for others. With a renewed sense of purpose, she plunged into research. The more she unpeeled the layers of local policy and community structure, the more her voice began to gain a steadiness. When her children would catch snippets of her fervent discussions with neighbors and her late-night study sessions, they would grin, bolstering her determination. Their belief in her gradually mirrored her own growing confidence. But as the day approached, an anxious flutter stirred in her stomach. What if her preparation remained insufficient? What if the council appeared impervious to her pleas, indifferent to the needs she now understood so deeply? A flickering doubt raged within her, questioning if she truly had the talent to articulate her newfound insights effectively. Recognizing this spiral of self-doubt, Jessica sought solace in her conversation with Mrs. Alder again. The older woman's stories had provided her with so much reassurance before. Sitting in the quiet, dim light of her living room, she found herself seeking not just advice, but affirmation. As she voiced her thoughts, her apprehension poured out more freely than anticipated. "Jessica," Mrs. Alder said, her gaze unwavering, "those medieval villagers didn't thrive because they had no fear. They thrived because they faced their fears together. You are not alone in this." Wisdom washed over her, mixing with the urgency she felt. It wasn't merely about her fear of the council. It was about what she was willing to confront together with her community. That intimate bond ignited a new fire within her, one that transcended her individual journey, intertwining her narrative with theirs. As she rose from her chair, an understanding coalesced within. This wasn't just her time to speak, but a pivotal moment to unite those who had entrusted their stories to her. She could choose to represent them, channel their frustrations and aspirations through her own voice. Each struggle shared, each small victory recounted, would blend seamlessly into her own. The day arrived, a mingling of anxiety and resolve melding into an almost crystalline clarity as she stepped toward the council hall. The real crucible wasn't just about speaking on behalf of her neighbors. It was about stepping into her role in their collective narrative, a promise woven from those resilient threads of the past. But as she approached the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows, a council member known for their staunch opposition to change. The tension in the air thickened, and she felt the ground beneath her tremble slightly, as though the weight of her choices loomed heavier than ever. Would she seize this moment with the courage of her newfound understanding, or would the voice of fear drown out her community's needs yet again? The moment of truth arrived. As Jessica stood at the entrance of the council hall, a tempest churned within her. The familiar figure of Harold Finch, the staunch council member, loomed closer, his features carved into a mask of skepticism. She could almost hear the judgment resonating from years of his calculated decisions and rigid adherence to tradition. Breathing deeply, she reminded herself that fear would only rob her of the courage she needed. "Jessica, is it? You think your little voice will make a difference here?" Harold's words dripped with condescension as he stepped into her path. This was not merely a man. He was a fortress built upon the unyielding demands of authority. Jessica felt the tension push against her. It wrapped tighter around her as she fought the impulse to retreat. For years she had navigated the currents of their community silently, but now the stakes had shifted. She had sifted through the weighty history of her neighbors' struggles, and they deserved more than a whisper. They deserved her to be a roar. Actually, I believe I'm here to represent a bigger picture, one you might not fully grasp. Her voice surprised her, carrying an edge that sliced through her trepidation. She realized then that this was no longer about her apprehensions. It was about those parents hoping for safer streets, and the elderly longing for connection. That's rich, coming from someone who has only just begun to peek over the horizon of governance. Harold shot back, his eyes narrowing with disdain. Unperturbed, Jessica met his gaze squarely, feeling the ripple of support from her community's aspirations flowing through her. I've learned from their stories. Their struggles are part of my narrative now. I understand that change doesn't come without cost nor with ease, but it starts by acknowledging the problems around us. The tension shimmered in the air like barbed wire, but her words seemed to unearth something within. There was a flicker of surprise on Harold's face, almost imperceptible yet revealing a crack in his otherwise polished veneer. Perhaps he was not as immovable as he pretended to be. And just like that, she felt her confidence swell, buoyed by the conviction of standing in her truth. As they moved closer toward the open doors of the council chamber, she could hear the murmur of voices filtering through. Each sound was a reminder of what she had prepared for her points, her arguments, but now they were supplemented with her emotional weight. This wasn't a performance. It was a raw declaration of intent. She envisioned her community behind her, urging her on, their silent strength pulsing like an electric charge. Jessica, you may find that your naive enthusiasm will only lead to disappointment in this arena, Harold cautioned as he stepped aside, his tone shifting as they entered the chamber. Was that supposed to intimidate her? No longer could she fall prey to someone else's doubt. This was her moment. This was the embodiment of her growth. Stray thoughts lingered about the lessons learned from the diary, the villagers who had relied on collaboration, the acknowledgement of their shared fears. She felt their ghosts whispering encouragement. As she took her place in front of the council, a wave of adrenaline coursed through her. They were no longer just seats filled by authority. They represented the opportunity to alter the course of her community's history. Yet just as she prepared to speak, the seating arrangements on the dais shifted, and a subtle gasp rippled through the crowd. Jessica's heart skipped a beat as she caught sight of an unexpected figure moving toward the council member's bench, someone she didn't anticipate being present, a powerful opponent known for their rhetoric against change. Tension compressed her chest. Had the opposition prepared a counterattack she hadn't foreseen? Would this meeting not just be a confrontation with fear, but a challenge against an established norm that sought to stifle her voice? This revelation shot through her like a bolt of lightning, but in its wake came clarity. Doubt and determination were two sides of the same coin. Was she ready to turn the tide? As the council members' discussions began, she felt the precariousness of that moment. The stakes were higher than ever. Would she unleash her voice, or would she falter under the weight of their scrutiny? The time had come to face the truth within herself, and the resistance beyond the council hall. The buzz of conversation swirled around Jessica like the chaotic winds of a brewing storm as she stood poised to address the council. The unexpected presence of her opponent stirred a potent mixture of anxiety and resolve within her. She glanced toward the dais, locking eyes with the imposing figure known for silencing new ideas with biting rhetoric. If she was to make her mark today, she needed to dig deeper than before. As the council members engaged in a preliminary discussion, Jessica felt her confidence teeter on a precipice. Would she really speak up? The fervent voices echoing in her mind urged her to confront the very doubts that had held her captive for so long. Harold Finch's dismissive tone loomed large, yet she realized it was no longer just about him. It was rooted in the histories, the pain, and the resilience of those who had come before her, the villagers whose stories reflected a fierce commitment to survival against all odds. Steeling her spine, she suppressed the impulse to shrink back. Instead, she envisioned the villagers as her allies, their struggles lining the seams of her own narrative. This was her moment to weave their tales into the tapestry of governance, a risky venture, yet the only one worth taking. She had learned well from her research. The medieval villagers had thrived in arenas where challenges loomed large. They had forged paths through innovation and solidarity. As Queen Titania took her place at the dais, a chill crept in the air, an unwelcome reminder of the opposition's indomitable grip on tradition. But what did that matter? She would honor those histories and let them guide the words she would soon speak. The gravity of the meeting transformed the chamber into a battleground. Would she succumb to hesitation, or would she seize the moment? With a steadying breath, Jessica prepared her opening statement. She envisioned the council's members, their expressions a mix of skepticism and indifference, but also the flicker of hope buried within them, the hope that change could come from someone who refused to relent. As she tightened her grip on the microphone, the steady thumping of her heart resonated in her ears, a reminder of her humanity amidst the architecture of authority. Esteemed members of this council, she began, projecting her voice across the chamber, today I stand not just as an individual, but as a voice for the stories that have endured through generations. Stories that teach us the power of collaboration and resilience in the face of adversity. The weight of her words hung in the air, and she could almost feel the communal legacy of the villagers settling around her shoulders like a cloak of armor. She watched Harold's expression, which flickered momentarily between disdain and intrigue. It was a small victory, but one that filled her with a sense of purpose. She was engaging him, and through him, the others listening. The discussion of policies and proposals flowed around her like an unseen current, but Jessica felt detached from it. She was committed to anchoring her voice within the narratives that mattered most. The council may have been steeped in the notions of what had always been, but she was inspired by what was possible. Yet, her fear was not fully extinguished. The weight of expectation pressed heavily upon her. The figure who had entered the chamber earlier, the source of her trepidation, now turned pointedly toward her. A knowing grin spread across their face, a taunt masked as a diplomatic smile. The audience seemed to sense the shift, their attention refocusing on the unfolding battle. Jessica had a choice. Would she retreat into the shadows of self-doubt, or would she draw strength from those who had come before her? The atmosphere crackled with tension, a reckoning looming larger than her own fears. How can I turn criticism into a force for change? She pondered, her mind racing. As she stood in that moment, with eyes upon her, one question flooded her thoughts. Was she ready to engage in a war of wits against an adept opponent? Ignoring the quivering ground beneath her feet, she knew she would have to confront not just the person opposing her ideas but the very core of her self-doubt. This was not just a matter of governance but personal growth, a chance to unearth the resolute spirit of transformation within. With the council chamber as her arena, the pivotal question echoed in her mind: how could she transform fear into a catalyst for change? The outcome felt shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing was clear: she was no longer merely a spectator. She was a contender ready to stake her claim. And as the gavel sounded to call the meeting into formal session, Jessica realized that she was about to discover not only the power of her voice but also the strength hidden within her own convictions, beckoning her toward an unforeseen future. Jessica's initial steps onto the council floor felt like crossing the threshold into a different reality. The air was thick with judgment, whether it came wrapped in passive-aggressive remarks or the palpable silence that often accompanied uncertainty and doubt. As she found her footing, she could sense the weight of history bearing down on her, a century of traditions encapsulated in the wary eyes of council members. "You must be careful, Jessica," a voice whispered from the corner of her mind. It belonged to every mentor who had cautioned her against the tides of change. Yet, as she drew in a breath, she realized that the sound had diminished to an echo, a mere ghost of who she used to be. Adapting is not just for the sheep, she reminded herself, remembering her own research on resilience. The villagers had learned to navigate the harshest conditions, much like she had to navigate this chamber. Each life, each story she read, was a reminder that fortitude was her inheritance, and she sensed their restless spirits rallying behind her, propelling her forward into the fray. Council members, change is not merely a reaction to past grievances. It is our opportunity for progress, Jessica declared, her voice more resolute than she felt. She stood before them not just as an advocate for the forgotten stories, but as a living testament to transformation itself. Could they see her as she had come to see herself, a bridge to something greater? She could feel Harold Finch's gaze honing in on her, the predator observing its prey. What foolishness will she say next? His eyes seemed to ask. Instead of wavering under his scrutiny, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. Consider the winter of our grandmothers, she continued, her tone provocative yet tempered by conviction. This town's survival stems from the very roots of teamwork and innovation. The villagers did not brave the bitter seasons alone. They pooled resources, they strategized, and they came together with a singular purpose. We have the same opportunity today. Why do we reject the lessons of the past? The hum of conversation resumed, a tide that rose and fell around her, yet Jessica felt an unfamiliar poise keep her anchored. With every word, she referenced the strong communal bonds that once defined an entire era, fueled by resilience amidst adversity. It was no longer solely about her ideas. She was fleshing out a collective memory. Yet before she could unravel more, Finch rose with an air of condescension. Are we to believe that your romanticized view of history will translate to today's modern complexities? His voice dripped with derision, attempting to undermine her newfound momentum. Jessica's heart raced, each pulse echoing in her ears. She had prepared for this, yet nothing could fully shield her from the weight of his challenge. What do you do when confronted with the familiar sting of doubt? This moment felt pivotal. What would she reveal of herself in response? It was in these very exchanges where personal development thrived, testing the very essence of who she aimed to be. She questioned her instinct to retreat deep into a place of insecurity, or a bold confrontation with doubt. I refuse to believe that history is merely a pit to fall into, she replied, internal strength bubbling to the surface even as it tussled with trepidation. It is a wellspring of possibility. If we can channel those stories, we can create our own narrative of transformation. We can innovate the way they did. Or we can stagnate. The choice is before us. She could see ripples of surprise play across the faces of her peers. Perhaps she was breaking through. Perhaps the stories of ages past were indeed ripe with lessons relevant to their present struggles. But with this confidence surged a nagging question: how would the council respond? Each face remained impassive, but she could sense the electricity in the chamber. Would they dismiss her impassioned plea, or could it ignite a spark of understanding? The silence stretched, heavy with potential. Decisions were being made in the quiet corners of their minds, and the outcome was nothing but an uncertainty she had to bear. This was the moment she must pivot. Her claim was now placed squarely on the council's shoulders. As the gavel came down again, calling for order, Jessica's pulse quickened. She was compelled to plant the seeds of her vision, while remaining vigilant of any potential backlash. The realization loomed: advocacy was not merely about a singular voice. It was a power that stemmed from the multitude of voices behind her. Yet, just as the currents began to shift, an unexpected shift of events unfolded. Outside, a commotion stirred, reverberating through the chamber walls. Jessica's heart sank. Had her moment in the sun become overshadowed by something unforeseen? What lay ahead would determine not only her trajectory but the very course of her burgeoning legacy. As whispers filled the air, one question engulfed her thoughts: would this new twist bolster her message or fracture the fragile cohesion she had begun to build? Jessica's senses sharpened as the commotion outside intensified, drawing the council's focus away from her plea. Anxiety coiled in her stomach, fueling her ambition, yet also raising an unsettling question: would this unexpected distraction dissolve her hard-earned momentum? The murmurs within the chamber swelled, each isolated expression shifting from skepticism to curiosity and back. On one hand, the cacophony presented her an opportunity to extend her argument. On the other, it risked undermining her progress. She clenched her fists at her sides, grounding herself in this moment of uncertainty. How could she reclaim the council's attention? A moment of reflection ensued. She could stand idle, overwhelmed by external chaos, or seized this unpredictable twist to further her narrative. A surge of inspiration replaced her initial hesitation. This moment outside is emblematic, she began, immediately redirecting the council's attention. The uproar signifies the struggle for progress, a battle mirrored in our own community dynamics. Just as the villagers of the past banded together to combat the bitter cold, we must join forces with clarity and purpose today. The rising clamor transformed into stillness, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a tangible shift in the room. The words flowed with conviction, each syllable echoing her belief that cohesion, not discord, drove significant change. Harold Finch's sharp gaze remained fixed on her, but now a slight crease had formed between his brows. She sensed the growing unease in him, a slight crack in his fortress of indifference. She pressed on, playing toward her discovery of this new energy sparked by her growing command over the assembly. Much like those who faced countless winters, we too must reform our approach. Isn't our history invaluable? It shapes not just who we are, but how we respond to adversity. The lessons of adaptation should not be ignored. She pivoted, her body firmly rooted, inviting the council members to absorb every word, as if they were keys unlocking the door to her vision. Finding strength in her gesture, she allowed herself to connect with them, not just to critique, but to inspire. Each council member's expression shifted, if only momentarily, hinting at the possibility of change. Amidst this realization, a new voice broke through the tension. "But Jessica," a soft-spoken council member interjected, "if we do embrace our history, how would we avoid becoming stagnant, like those we wish to learn from?" Jessica's pulse raced, the challenge exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Did she truly have an answer? Each decision she faced was more than rhetoric. It was the crucible of her development, and the moment she could truly mold her identity. "Stagnation is a fear rooted in misconception," she replied, pulling from earlier discussions. "The past fosters a foundation of resilience, not a blueprint for rigidity. By understanding our predecessors, we harness their spirit of innovation for our own context. Imagine infusing their resourcefulness with modern perspectives and technology." As she spoke, she could feel fragments of her doubts dissolve like snow melting under the sun. This moment in her journey was crystallizing into something more. It was a turning point not just for her advocacy but for her own self-image. She was no longer merely an advocate caught in the storm. She was emerging as a leader, capable of guiding her community through familiar terrain as they navigated unfurling complexities. With heightened awareness, she scanned the council members' faces, searching for signs of alignment. Would they embrace her model of transformation, or would Finch's skepticism crush her aspirations? As discussions began to swirl again, amplifying her inner turmoil, she could feel the slow dawning of realization. The council was coming alive, and this battle would reveal not just the power of her voice, but the strength of her vision. Yet as something shifted within the assembly, a loud crash erupted from the entry of the chamber, startling every person present. Jessica's heart sank. The noise bore an unsettling message. Just when she thought the council was pivoting towards acceptance and dialogue, what chaos now loomed at the threshold. Her future suddenly felt as precarious as ever. Where would this interruption take her message now? With her resolve strengthened, she stood ready to confront whatever emerged next, knowing it could either be her downfall or a defining breakthrough. The doors swung open with a forceful bang, and a figure staggered into the chamber, cloaked in a tattered coat that brushed the floor. Jessica's heart raced. The unexpected entrance added another layer to her mounting anxiety. Dust billowed in the air, mingling with the electric tension that filled the room. The newcomer clutched an object tightly, its shape obscured by his ragged attire. For a moment, silence enveloped the council, curiosity piquing as their gazes fixated on the man. Even Harold Finch, seemingly the embodiment of stoicism, shifted slightly in his seat. Jessica, her instincts sharp, sensed an opportunity not merely to address the chaos, but to fortify her emerging role as a leader during this unforeseen turbulence. "What brings you here?" she called out, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. The man dropped to his knees, revealing a weathered face, lines etched deep from both time and hardship. "I couldn't stand by any longer. The storm is coming." You need to know what is on the horizon. His breath came in quick gasps, urgency thrumming in his words. Jessica's heart shifted, dread mingling with intrigue. This was not mere confusion, it felt like a portent of something larger, something she couldn't afford to overlook. Tell us, she implored, her own determination pushing forth. What do you mean? The harsh winter will be upon us again, more severe than any before. Our villages are not ready, and the resources are dwindling. His gaze scanned the gathering, settling resolutely on her. But there's knowledge we've forgotten, powers we once wielded to endure. This echoed Jessica's own sentiments about history and ideas she had recently harnessed in her arguments. This stranger had now unwittingly become both an ally and a linchpin in her developing narrative. Her mind raced. Could this information pivot the council's direction? Voices like yours are essential, she murmured, leaning in, anchoring herself to the emotional weight of the moment. Her heart brimmed with conflicting feelings, fear of the upcoming storm mixed with hope ignited by the man's unexpected arrival. You're saying we must return to our roots? Yes, he exclaimed, shaking with both fervor and fright. There's wisdom buried in our forefathers' ways, forgotten in our comfort of modernity. We must adapt once more, find strength in those pasts. Jessica's internal dialogue churned, intertwining history with necessity. She envisioned a council not just grappling with external strife but awakening their own latent abilities. What do you propose? She asked, every word a calculated move to keep the momentum flowing. Gather the folk. Reawaken traditions. Rediscover what made us resilient. The room buzzed with reactions, council members exchanging glances that conveyed creeping apprehension and burgeoning excitement. Just as Jessica felt the air thickening with potential, Harold Finch stood, his demeanor serious. This isn't a fairy tale. Do you really believe we can simply revive the past to combat the future? His skepticism was a boulder dropped into the fragile pool of possibility. Jessica inhaled sharply, a wave of frustration surging within her. This moment wasn't about idealism, it was about survival. What if embracing the lessons of our past is precisely what we need? This is not a call to go backward, but to innovate with depth. We find power in our narratives to create anew. The council members shifted in their seats, the air thickening as each individual grappled with their biases and fears. She understood their hesitation, but that very realization inspired a surge of ambition within her. This was an inflection point, a chance for her to act decisively, to emerge not just as a speaker, but as a catalyst of change. Yet, beneath her fervor, doubt lingered. Would they trust the stranger's insights as she did? Would Finch's harsh glare extinguish the flicker of shared purpose forming among them? The crash of the moment hung heavy in the air. As tension tightened, everything was at stake. Jessica braced herself, knowing the conversation could spiral any direction. The path forward was as uncertain as the coming storm, but she steeled herself to guide the council through this chaos where the true test of her leadership lay ahead. Just then, a thunderous pad of footsteps echoed from outside, the noise rising to a crescendo, creating an unsettling foil to the turning point unfolding within. What now surged toward them, adding further uncertainty to the stakes already in play. The heavy footsteps reverberated through the chamber, punctuating the charged atmosphere with mounting dread. Jessica felt a momentary jolt of energy, her pulse quickening, heart thundering against the constraints of her steady facade. The figure from earlier had ignited the room as discussions, but the new sounds demanded her immediate attention. They threatened to close off the fragile window of opportunity she'd just begun to forge. What was that? Someone muttered, glancing toward the thick, wooden doors as if they might splinter under the pressure of whatever lurked outside. With a measured breath, Jessica raised her hand, a gesture for calm, though within she wrestled with the impending uncertainty. It was pivotal. This was the crux of her emerging leadership. Would she quail in fear alongside her peers, or rise to meet the unknown, wielding the authority she had slowly begun to claim? Let us focus, she urged, her voice rising above the anxious whispers. We've been given a chance to forge a path, but we cannot abandon our discussions now. The room quieted incrementally, skepticism still weaving through every glare, But the resolve in her voice offered a glimmer of hope, holding their focus for a few more moments. The air thickened with silence, interrupted suddenly as one of the guards burst through the door, panting heavily. His clothes were disheveled, eyes wide with panic. "They've come! A band of traitors from the north unprepared. They're fleeing a pack of raiders." At the mention of danger, the tension morphed into a collective urgency. Fear ignited in each council member's eyes, the implications cascading rapidly in Jessica's mind. This was not merely an external threat, it was a direct reflection of the precarious state of their community, mirroring the urgent warnings from the stranger. "Do we engage?" one member of the council whispered, uncertainty radiating from him. Jessica's heart sank momentarily, battling her instinct to retain order against the urgency of the situation. Yet, in that sinking feeling, she found a solid foundation for her resolve. Instead of scrambling to parry incoming challenges, she had an opportunity to stand firm to unify the council under a vision that not only focused on survival but resolved to protect their future. "We need to build alliances, not walls," she declared, surprising even herself with the steel in her tone. "These traitors could hold knowledge strategies from the north that we haven't considered. They are potential allies, not threats." The conversation swelled, some nodding in agreement, while others remained skeptical. Jessica felt urgency binding her ambition, and with each shared thought she pushed further into her role as a leader. "Let us seize this moment. We must offer shelter, offer ourselves. Invite them to share the wisdom of their experience against the harshness of winter." The idea was both daring and dangerous. It brushed against the edges of her personal fears, the fear of being dismissed, of leading her people into further peril. But the prospect of unearthing hidden talents and collective knowledge was intoxicating. This was where her leadership would be solidified or tested to its limits. The room erupted into a cacophony of opinions, the council's dynamics shifting immeasurably. Jessica felt the electric charge beneath her skin, the awareness that she was stepping into unknown territory. How did one lead amidst chaos, especially when conflicting emotions collided around them? "The storm is coming, yes," she thought, contemplating the stranger's words. "But there's strength in unity." With every debate, every voice raised for or against her, she realized that this was a microcosm of the larger battle that lay ahead. As ideas clashed, so did the resolve of each person in that room, her own resolve crystallizing, fiercely developing within her. Jessica turned her mind towards the gathering storm, not just outside, but within the fabric of her leadership. Would they trust her vision enough to join her in this unexpected course of action? Just then, a dull crash echoed from the back of the chamber, a signal that decision would be needed rapidly. The uncertainty climbed, each breath a prelude to a greater revelation. Would she step forward with the strength she sensed brewing within herself, or would she hesitate and lose her counsel as well as her opportunity? In that moment of reckoning, Jessica realized the confrontation that awaited her was not only with storms, raiders, or council members, it was with herself. What she would discover about her own capabilities in the shadow of crisis would define not just her leadership but her very essence. As the footsteps and chaos from outside grew louder, the weight of her next decision pressed down, and every heartbeat echoed, urging her to claim her emerging identity. What awaited her beyond those doors could either be a path to resilience or further disaster. As the clamor of voices rose around her and the urgency of the moment pushed her forward, Jessica took a deep breath, centering herself in the chaos of the council chamber. The pounding footsteps continued, resonating ominously, but she could feel the whispers of the medieval villagers, the very essence of resilience pulsing in her veins. History had shown her that this moment was not merely a test, it was an opportunity to redefine her reality, both for herself and for her community. Resolutely, she stepped closer to the dais, her voice unwavering. "We have a choice. We can either shy away from the unknown, risking stagnation, or we can embrace this challenge as a chance to innovate and flourish." With each word, she leveraged the energy around her, transforming anxiety into a driving force. The council members turned their attention towards her, urging curiosity amidst their apprehension. "Let us not forget that adversity breeds creativity. Discovering our place among the challenges of the present allows us to weave our own legacy, just as the villagers did centuries ago. The tension shifted slightly, voices quieting, and she seized this moment to drive the conversation forward. If we open our doors to these traders, we can learn from their experiences, adapt our plans, and build alliances that may see us through the harshest of winters. We will emerge stronger through cooperation, just like our ancestors. Nods of consideration began to ripple through the council. She felt the stirrings of connection, members weighing their personal stakes alongside those of the community. No longer were they simply spectators, they were participants in a collective story. It was as if the very air in the chamber transformed, electrified by possibility. The air shifted as a brave council member interjected, buoyed by Jessica's fervor. What if we establish a temporary support system for these traders? This could foster goodwill and offer us insights into their struggles, helping us prepare our own response to the upcoming storm. Laughter in defense of the concept filled the room. Yes, Jessica affirmed, gripping the podium tightly as if anchoring her resolve. A council-wide initiative. Encouraging our residents to lend aid and share resources will demonstrate to the traders and ourselves what a unified community can accomplish. The growing momentum dazzled her. As discussion swirled, infusing tension with vitality, she felt her confidence solidify. This connection with her peers heralded her evolution. She was no longer a mere participant in her own life but a leader capable of envisioning greater trajectories. Yet amidst the momentum, an enduring question gnawed at her. Would the council ultimately embrace change, or would the so-called status quo crush her aspirations? She couldn't let uncertainty sway her. She had to embody the strength she had gleaned from those villagers and her support system. Jessica leaned into the moment, channeling that collective spirit. Finally, she presented her vision. Let us not see these traders as an obstacle, but as a key, she said, her voice resonant with conviction. By creating a community task force to address the impending storm as they did centuries ago, we are not simply reacting. We are proactively aiming to weave a strong safety net. Change is possible when we come together. The murmurs cascaded, voices igniting once again with urgency. Each member began to share their district's resources and expertise, outlining plans to gather support and invite the traders to their homes. Recognition ignited among the council as ideas flourished. Then, like a candle igniting a conflagration, a voice called, "Let us invite the traders in to share their stories more broadly. Offer them local delicacies, fortifying relationships in the warmth of our community." This would not only symbolize their support but also weave together the very fabric of their history moving forward. A gust of exhilaration rushed through Jessica as she beheld the development of her vision, now a blossoming reality. They were crafting change together, and she was at the helm of this transformative journey. As the planning session progressed, the atmosphere shifted from trepidation to coherence. Suddenly, she wasn't just an advocate, but the embodiment of resilience, her voice echoing the memory of medieval villagers thriving in unrelenting winters. The promise of her legacy stretched before her, a promise fulfilled through concrete actions and a vigorous community spirit. With a decisive conclusion reached, the council meeting transitioned from talking points to tangible outcomes. They would not face the storm alone, they would face it together. Jessica felt each conversation layering like bricks. She was building something new not just for herself and her children, but for generations yet to come. As the meeting adjourned, exhilaration coursed through her. She had transformed uncertainty into empowerment, manifesting resolve into a shared narrative that would echo through their town. It was a mark of profound personal achievement, a culmination of her journey from doubt to the steady light of leadership. She left the chamber, stepping out like the medieval villagers stepping out of their cloisters, weathering the chilling winds of winter together. The potential recent realization about herself that she could live out her values both as a mother and advocate was the true triumph. As she departed, she felt the weight lift, knowing that she had fostered not just plans but resilience, community, and ultimately, purpose, transforming her legacy into a legacy of strength and adaptability. Now, as you reflect on this remarkable journey of resilience and the power of community, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. We want to hear from you. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Show your support for true stories of personal overcoming.